Wine Line Radio. This is your host, Robert Scott. And today I have with me David Fuhr, noted wine expert. And we are going to be talking about the Wild East. So what does that mean? The Wild East, this is kind of a yippee-yi-yo-ki-yay in reverse. David, good morning.
Good morning, Robert.
How are you?
I'm enjoying a winter melt. It's warmed up to the point where the ice and snow is melting here in the Hudson Valley of New York, where I reside.
Well, last night in Orlando it was 84 degrees, so we're experiencing some unseasonably warm weather here. Listen, we're going to review a number of wines that are from locales in the States that are away from the West Coast. Now, what's the reason for that? And why is this becoming more and more important?
Well, Robert, the uptick in non-left coast U.S. wines kind of started, I would say, in the 2000s. It's been a pretty recent development. Not to say that wines from quality vines, Vitis vinifera, haven't been grown elsewhere than the West Coast for many years. They have. But in terms of the recognition and the spread of that development, it's been relatively recent, and that's partly due to a few different factors. Climate change has certainly assisted in the ability for the Vitis vinifera to grow in climates that it was otherwise having problems in. In addition to that, the knowledge that has been learned and shared over many years has come to the point where people who are growing the grapes and making the wine are getting a better sense of how to combat difficulties, provided by nature, and technology for wine production has dramatically increased, and availability of this technology has become more widespread and more inexpensive on a grand basis. That's played a part in it as well. The interest of the American wine drinker has broadened. The number of people drinking wine has increased, and the amount per capita consumed has also increased. So that has been driving growth of wines throughout all 50 U.S. states. By the way, the last state to fold, I believe, in planting the quality vine of vinifera was, I think, back in 2007. And the last state to fold was not Alaska, which is what most people think. Nope, it was North Dakota.
Wow.
North Dakota, yeah. So yeah, there's actually wine made in North Dakota these days, but we're not going to here to talk about North Dakota. I guess we're going to start out east, as you'd indicated here with the Wild East.
Right, and let me just say that we'll be tasting wines from New York State, from New Jersey, Pennsylvania, again the Finger Lakes region of New York, and Virginia.
Shall we get on with New York?
All right. What would you like to taste first?
Yeah, well, that's where I'm calling you from. And New York has 5 different AVAs, but the two we're going to focus on here today are the ones that are both the largest and the best known, the Finger Lakes, which is a series of, as the name would imply, lakes that run as fingers, more or less north-south. In the north-central part of the state, and Long Island, which is, for those of you whose geography knows, east of New York City. A couple of the boroughs are there on the western point, but farther east is where we get the better quality grapes and wines as well. So the Finger Lakes has best been known for Riesling, and there's been lots written about the great Rieslings of the Finger Lakes, and well-deserved. They are certainly world-class, a great many producers making them. Probably the most lauded and longest, one of the longest certainly, is Dr. Constantine Frank Winery. And today, rather than taste one of their many superlative Rieslings, I thought we'd take a different tack, start off on a twist, and taste a wine that is a hearkening to the origin of the winery. We're going to taste the Saperavi, which is not only a red skin grape, it's a red flesh grape. The French refer to that as a Teinturier. And so it's easy to make a very, very red wine. Saperavi is a grape that originated in the Ukraine. Well, Dr. Constantine Frank also originated in the Ukraine, despite the Germanic-sounding name. There's a lot of ethnic Germans that lived in the Ukraine way back when. So this is something that the Frank Winery has been working with for quite a while, but they've only commercialized it. I don't know the exact date, but it's not all that recently. They've done it as a single varietal wine. But that's what we're here today to taste, and I think you have that in front of you as well. I'm pouring
Yeah,
wine.
and boy, you don't pull any punches, do you? This is starting out with probably the biggest wine on the list.
It's yeah, and Robert, rather than me telling you, because I'm really familiar with Saperavi, having actually been to Georgia, where the grape is originally from, the country of Georgia, that is, and tasted through there 11 years ago. What's your impression of this wine in terms of appearance, smell, and taste?
Well, it's a dark wine,
Mhm.
and the nose initially getting some spicy notes and more red berries. I'm getting an expression when I taste it of a wine that's not too dissimilar from Sagrantino, maybe a blended Sagrantino like a Montefeltro Rosa, but with less tannin.
Indeed, Saperavi has the capacity, obviously, to make, well, not obviously, it has the capacity to make red wine in very cool climates, making it very suitable for the Finger Lakes, which has a notable, very cool climate. Fred Frank, the current patron of the winery, and his daughter, Megan, who oversees things these days with great skill, are doing very well with this. And they've also done some great things with the companion white grape from this part of the world, Cazzetelli. This particular Saperavi, it's not as inky in terms of its appearance as a great many of the wines from its original country of Georgia would likely be.
Mm-hmm.
It is still very, very brilliant, purple red color to it. It's got a little bit of a light berry, woodsy kind of nose, and on the palate, it is. I call this, a medium-bodied, light to medium-bodied wine. Even though the color would indicate otherwise, it's pretty easygoing. It's got a pleasant acidic grip on the tongue, making it very refreshing and perfectly suitable for nice times at the table.
Yeah, I could see this paired with pasta, for instance. I think it would make a great match.
There you go.
Very interesting wine.
Indeed, I'm enjoying it too. Now, next, we're going to go zip off to the Long Island. It's another red wine. See, I'm trying to break with convention here. A lot of people, they think about New York State, they're going to be thinking of white wines, and that's good reason. There's certainly more white grapes than red grapes planted here, and more white wines made. But here on Long Island as well, they've become very well known for Merlot, with good reason. A lot of good wineries making Merlot, in both historically and currently. There's also some really good sparkling wines being made today. I want to put a shout out to Sparkling Point Winery out there, who unfortunately are not participating with us today, though have graced me with some of their bottles before, and they are terrific. But here we're talking about Channing Daughters. And the fellows who run this operation have decided to very much go against the grain. Yeah, they work with Riesling in part, and they work with Merlot in part, but not to the exclusion of trying really unusual things. What we got here is a Lagrein, Lagrein, which is a grape variety, a red grape variety from Northeast Italy. Now, even in Northeast Italy, it's not held in very high regard or, even terribly widely planted. But a few hardy souls, both here in New York and in Oregon, are tinkering around with Lagrein and a few of the more obscure northern Italian grape varieties as well. And here, let's give a big difference between the Finger Lakes and Long Island. Long Island, as any of you might know, it's an island in the sea. And so it's relatively really low elevation and very, very sandy soils compared to the Finger Lakes, which is a kind of more moderate elevation. I believe it's about 700-800 feet up there. And the soils are rather diverse. You'll even find bits of slate, not uncommon as to what you find in Germany's best wine regions too. But here with the Lagrein from Channing Daughters, it's a red wine in terms of appearance, got a little bit more of a purplish, darker hue to it than the previous one we tasted. And smelling it, softer, slightly more floral smell to it. Mm.
I like this wine a lot. I tasted it. In fact, I drank the whole bottle on Saturday evening at the Citrus Club, and it was unusual. We had a Korean barbecue buffet, and I found that this wine, because of the acidity of it, actually paired well with that. When I normally would have had a dry Riesling or even a ice cold Korean beer.
Interesting choice.
Yeah.
In terms of comparing these two red wines from New York State, there's a bit more density, a bit more of a lush palate on the Lagrein now, given the elevation, and likelihood of it being more constant temperature, being on a low elevation island. That would kind of indicate you get a bit more of a mid palate to it. And the soils up in the Finger Lakes being a bit more rugged and stony would certainly support crisper, firmer structured wine that the Saperavi from Constantine Frank gives.
Yeah, I would certainly have to agree with that.
Okay. Shall we take a, well, you want to, the Channing Daughters also makes one of their more unusual wines. They call it Ramato. And quickly, it's Pinot Gris, and most of us are accustomed to having, Pinot Grigios from Italy or Pinot Gris from Alsace, France, or even perhaps from Oregon. But what they do here is very unusual. The Ramato from Channing Daughters has been soaked in the skins. It's one of these orange wines people like talking about. And this is a wine that's been fermented on the skins rather than pressed off the juice and then fermented juice. And I opened this last night to pair off with a roast leg of lamb that I created, and stood up pretty well to the flavor some red meat.
Yeah, the color is just amazing on it. It's got this coppery hue that just kind of spreads out through the glass, and it's beautiful color wine.
If someone's looking for a Pinot Gris that they're accustomed to, this is certainly not going to make them happy. It's a wine with tension and structure, best suited to wine at the table, and it doesn't have the capacity, for floral and fruity characters one is typically accustomed to for Pinot Gris.
Yeah,
but it is certainly a good, well-boned wine, got good structure.
Certainly not a aperitif.
No,
definitely.
Exactly.
And I get a lot of the same fruits that you do with a normal Pinot Gris, but they come in really more like dried fruit rather than fresh fruit.
Indeed. Shall we cross the state lines, move off to New Jersey? Now, I mentioned Oregon briefly, and that was just in passing. The connection that Alba has is that it's a founder. It's a fellow by the name of Rudy Marchese, who these days is proprietor of Montanora Vineyards in Oregon. Rudy started Alba long time ago, and he is no longer there. But we have some of the fruits of his early labor still carried on here by Tom and John, the owner and winemaker over there. And Alba is not only one of the larger wine producers in New Jersey, it's, in my opinion, one of the better ones. Now, that said, I haven't spent much time plumbing the depths of New Jersey wines. I've only tasted a couple other wineries, but when I did, alongside of Alba, their Riesling is what really, really got my attention, and here we are tasting their Riesling. This vintage is the 2016. I believe it's their current release.
Boy, it's nice. I understand this was all stainless steel maturation, and
it certainly smells and feels like it on the
exactly.
palate. Not any sense of wood there. It's taut as all get out. you can serve this alongside raw oysters. It would be really bracing alongside of it and wouldn't seem awkward. Whereas if you want to put this away and forget about it in a cool, dark place for a few years' time, I can imagine it's going to blossom into a lovely wine to drink just on its own. But right now it's taut and and a bit, without being too pejorative, rigid.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And because of that, I think that it would really go well with some stronger cheeses.
Ooh. And it is dry.
It is really dry.
So if anybody has any concerns about having Rieslings that are sweet, this is not one of them. Yum.
Yeah, very interesting wine.
Yep, it makes me want to.
Maybe I should have had this with the Korean barbecue.
That's a morning wake up wine.
Yeah, and that's what we're doing, folks. We're recording this 10 o'clock in the morning Eastern time, and this is a great way to start the day. I don't normally do this, but it's a great opportunity to see how your body absorbs at this early hour. Where should we go next, do you think?
Let's continue. Let's continue crossing state lines directly and make our way over to Pennsylvania and try the Gruner Veltliner, an Austrian grape variety. But here it's planted at the Galen Glen Winery in the Lehigh Valley, which is, the best of my knowledge, again, I haven't spent any time in Pennsylvania exploring their vineyards, and I would like very much to do so. However, from what I understand, the Lehigh Valley is really where the greatest concentration of good quality wines in Pennsylvania are located. And this one's made by a woman who's garnered a lot of good press for her work, Ms. Troxel. I believe it's Sarah Troxel. Correct me if I'm wrong on that first name. Ms. Troxel has been garnering international attention, not only for her Gruner Veltliner, which is, I've had it before, it was really good, but also her Riesling. It's gotten kind of big kudos in Austria recently, at a famous competition in Austria. So let's go ahead and taste this.
Okay.
Galen Glen 2016 vintage. And Gruner Veltliner is the flagship white grape from Austria, as many people might know. However, it's been planted extensively in small lots, but extensively throughout the United States. You'd be surprised. Up in the Finger Lakes, there's some terrific production taking place by many wineries. I'm happy to call friends as well. You'll find good quality Gruner Veltliner being made in Oregon, a bit in Washington, some in California as well, and it's growing slowly, and to the point where I created an event called Austria Abroad. It's happened twice already in New York. We're looking to replicate it in Detroit this spring, where we taste Gruner Veltliner and Lemberger Blaufränkisch, which is the red flagship grape of Austria, from around the U.S. and from around the world.
Well, everybody should look forward to that, and you can check back with us to see if the event is happening, where and when in Detroit, and we'll be happy to post that information. Interesting wine. It reminds me a lot of, I have a friend in Côte de Bourg in the right bank in Bordeaux, and this reminds me of his Sauvignon Blancs.
Yeah, it's got that light, crisp, slightly herbaceous character. Gruner Veltliner, the two most common aromatic attributes associated with Gruner Veltliner: white pepper and pea shoots, pea pods or pea shoots, and this certainly is within that realm.
It's nice.
I'm enjoying this. I also had the pleasure of tasting some wines from another quality winer out there in Chadsford, PA, Penn's Woods, another good winery focused on Pennsylvania grown grapes.
You get that honeyed citrus, and it absolutely get that sweet pea note in there a little bit, and some spice. Tastes good.
Indeed.
Where do we go next?
Let's continue our way to Virginia, where there are so many great wines that, and I have spent some time in Virginia, been there a few times to write about it for wine trade publications. And it was an embarrassment of riches, just as it is here in New York, from which people to ask for tastes of their wines and to write about. So I can, as in both cases with the Finger Lakes and with Virginia, I can recite any number of great producers. But in this case, we chose the Veritas Winery. The family, the Hodson family, who own and run this, live on site. Three generations of Hodsons are there, and they have a little bit of B&B as well as widespread vineyards on some lovely locations. And I had asked winemaker daughter Emily, who is really terrific and bright and very focused on her work, to send me her Petit Mansang. Again, I'm looking for unusual grapes because that makes me happy. I'm happy to drink Chardonnay and Cab and Pinot Noir all the time too, but I look for unusual grapes. And here, I had some great Petit Mansang from her over the years, and it's a grape from the southwest of France originally. And rather than send me her dry wine, I didn't specify, she sent me the sweet. She sent us both the sweet.
Well, I'm glad she did, because it's absolutely delicious.
Yeah, I have to agree. And I'm going to pour myself some of this. And as I do and taste it, happy to hear your thoughts on it, Robert.
Well, it's very tropical in nature, I think. Mango, pineapple, maybe some like candied citrus fruits. But there's some spice in there too, and some floral notes that I think are really interesting, like white flowers.
Having had plenty of examples of this, from the homeland of France, I have to say that in a blind tasting, I wouldn't know this. This wasn't a Jurançon, a sweet version. Now, Petit Mansang is the Mansang grape is never made like, so we say richly sweet, like you'd have as a Sauterne. It's always ending up, if it's going to be sweet, it's always going to be medium sweet. It just seems to strike the right balance that way. And she's certainly succeeded here in this version that we have. It's coming from a half bottle, and it is from the 2014 vintage. Now, I don't know this for a fact. I haven't checked, but I would suspect some of this wine has spent some time in oak. But if indeed it has, it's very well integrated, doesn't pop out. It just has a sense of roundness to it that I think some barrel aging would have provided.
Yeah, it's really well balanced, and it's got a long, clean finish to it.
I'm with you there. No cloying, sweet character whatsoever. Beautifully balanced. And to be fair, I mean, the wineries we're tasting today. It's difficult to often find them if you're not in those states proper. There are exceptions to every rule. The Dr. Constantine Frank is available in a great many U.S. states. I'm not sure about the Saperavi in particular, but you can find them in many states. I wouldn't be surprised, Robert, if they're available there in Florida. And though I doubt Veritas is very widespread in the U.S., I do know that Barboursville, which is probably one of the best known older quality wineries in Virginia, is indeed widely distributed through the United States. I remember enjoying it in my former home of Austin, Texas, over some Franklin's barbecue and writing about it some years ago.
Yeah, that's it's great to know where to. It's great to talk about the wines, but it's great to know where to get them. One of the things that one can do, other than just looking directly at the website for the winery, is go to www.go-wine.com. There's a database there of wineries by state, and chances are you'll find all of these wineries listed at go-wine.com.
That would be actually an excellent suggestion, Robert. And I dare say that all these wines would be available through distribution in their states, and you can probably track them down through Go-Wine in that regard. So the wineries we've touched upon here today, in reverse order, are Veritas, Galen Glenn, Alba, Channing Daughters, and Dr. Constantine Frank.
Well, before we close out, I want to jump back to your state of New York and back to the Hamptons to talk about a wine that I had yesterday that just totally knocked me out. And that's the Tokai Friulano from Channing Daughters. It's a very, very unusual Tokai. And as you know, they no longer are allowed to use Tokai in naming the wines from Italy because of the confusion with the Hungarian Tokai. So in Italy now it's just Friulano. But this was, I thought it was going to be kind of frizzante, but it was even a little more sparkling than frizzante wine. And I just thought that it was delicious and really difficult to put down.
That's nice to know. I think that folks in Long Island in general could. There's a fair amount of sparkling wine made. More could be made. I think, given its proximity to New York City and what the people visiting and living in around New York like, I think sparkling wine is a great way to go, especially for Long Island in terms of its. The fact that people go there just for weekends to visit commonly, and having something to celebrate a weekend away from the city. And sparkling wine is always seen as celebratory is a good way to go.
Well, I certainly thought it was delicious, and I'm going to try to get some more of it. David Furr, thank you so much for doing this. You've got me buzzed on a Monday morning, so even though I spit a lot. It's been great, and folks, this is just the beginning of a 3-part series on non-Left Coast wines. So we'll keep you posted on winelineradio.com and also on Go Wine, and you'll know what's coming up next in the series. So again, David, thank you so much. It was a great tasting and a wonderful job of selecting the wines.
My pleasure, Robert. Next step, out to the Midwest.